I believe in God. I believe in the supernatural God who created the heavens and the earth.
Whoa, what? We all know that most of the religious nuts in the world are located on the west of the Atlantic, but occasionally someone from my homeland pops up and proves that a god is the only way. We're getting a daily dose of wisdom today as an Oxford mathematician destroys atheism. Prepare to have your world turned upside down. Or, not. Hello, I'm the Skeptic, the British floating circle that watches people make extraordinary claims and then I explain why I don't accept what they're saying. The Daily Dose of Wisdom is a channel that was started because it's clear to Brandon that God is real. And with 300,000 subscribers, I guess he must be doing something right. Amongst his 159 videos, as of me writing this, he has a video that's amassed 4 million views in a month, where an Oxford Brainiac destroys atheism. It's about time. We've had an easy ride so far of not accepting the claims of gods. However, before atheism does get destroyed once and for all, if this isn't your first Skeptic video, hit the like, the subscribe and the bell, and let's destroy the atheist algorithm. And a super thanks to those that hit super thanks in some recent videos. SBNWNC, Galactus the Destroyer, Will, Kevin and Lark Latroy. Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe bestows leaves upon you all. More hen. Hold on to your worldview. Atheism is about to be put to bed.
What you're about to listen to is absolutely exceptional. It's John Lennox with Oxford Union making his case for God. It's extremely dense. He packs a lot into a little amount of time. So feel free to pause, rewind, whatever you need to make sure that you're really grasping each and every idea that he lays out. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive in.
I believe in God. I believe in the supernatural God who created the heavens and the earth.
Hang on, I used to live near Oxford when I lived in England. I thought it was called Oxford University, not Oxford Union. So much has changed since I left the UK 2 years ago. And this is how atheism is being destroyed? By John Lennox saying what he believes? So what? Are you going down the route of him being a professor at a university, so we've got to accept what he says?
I believe in a God who holds the heavens and the earth in existence. I believe that on the basis of rational evidence.
Well, I'd hope that you wouldn't accept irrational evidence. But what is the evidence?
And as we look at the rise of science in the 16th and 17th centuries, Alfred North Whitehead and many others commented that men became scientific because they expected law in nature, and they expected law in nature because they believed in a lawgiver.
In the 16th and 17th century, when scientific tools were basic microscopes and telescopes, and when medical science was using lead or mercury to treat ailments, and when the culture was still owning people as property and being instructed on how to do so in the good book, I don't think that's a good point to be referencing.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not ashamed of being both a scientist and a Christian, because arguably Christianity gave me my subject. What I am amazed at is that serious thinkers today continue to ask us to choose between God and science.
Maybe because the scientific instruments of today can't see any gods, and folks have decided that, since no gods have ever demonstrated themselves to exist, that belief in them is a little bit silly. So maybe start to decide on supernatural belief or progress.
That's like asking people to choose between Henry Ford and engineering as an explanation of the motor car.
So good.
At least Henry Ford was a real demonstrable person. Maybe a better analogy would have been picking between the tooth fairy and dentistry.
When Newton discovered his law of gravity, he didn't say, I've got a law, I don't need God. No, he wrote the Principia Mathematica, arguably the greatest work in the whole history of science. Because he saw that God is not the same kind of explanation as a scientific explanation. God doesn't compete. Agency does not compete with mechanism and law.
Essentially, God isn't needed when scientists learn how to explain why things work. Got it.
Why is there something rather than nothing?
Ah, the age-old question. There is actually a very simple answer to this, which many people will not like, and it can be answered for any why question. The simple answer is because.
Alan Sandage, the brilliant cosmologist who became a Christian in his 50s, said God is the answer to that question.
Wait! You mean to tell me someone who lived in America became religious? No way. That is so Hang on. No, it's not surprising. And how brilliant someone is doesn't prove the existence of what they believe. Stephen Hawking, one of the most brilliant minds of our lifetime, didn't believe there was a God. So now what?
But people are now so desperate to show that the universe created itself from nothing, which seems to me to be an immediate oxymoron. If I say X created Y, I'm assuming the existence of X to explain the existence of Y. If I say X created X, I'm assuming the existence of X to explain the existence of X.
Exactly. And most folks subscribe to X having always existed. But if it was a god, or G, what did G exist in to be able to produce X? If X never existed, how could G exist?
Which simply shows that nonsense remains nonsense even if high-powered scientists utter it.
That might be worth rewinding in case you missed it the first time. That is such a good point.
But you could change the word God to Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leave me upon her, and there would still be issues. Where did Lisa come from? Can you prove Lisa exists? I mean, I can, because I feel Lisa in my heart, and I've had too many experiences of things for it not to have been a giant cosmological rainbow giraffe's influence. Sounds silly when it's not the God, right? Well, that's how the God sounds to non-believers.
Reminds me a little bit of G.K. Chesterton, who said, "It is absurd to complain that it is unthinkable for an unthinkable God to make everything out of nothing, and then to pretend that it is more thinkable that nothing should turn itself into everything."
But, like it's been said countless times, it's theists that think there was nothing, and all because some old text says that a god created the heavens and the earth, so they're assuming there was nothing previous. Now there's nothing on their minds, and when you ask believers questions, really, there's absolutely nothing there.
The heavens declare the glory of God, says the ancient psalm.
An ancient psalm. Oh, I guess we should be listening to the things from a time when folks thought the way to get disease out of a body was to make a hole in the skull of a patient.
And we've unravelled a bit of that, seeing the fine-tuning of the fundamental forces of nature. It's something that's so striking to scientists that it demands explanation. And it seems to me that Arno Penzias hit it right. He is the Nobel Prize winner who discovered the microwave background on which a lot of the evidence for the Big Bang is based. He said astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with the very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the right conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan.
And fortunately, science has progressed since then so that there's a better understanding of all this, and nothing supernatural's needed.
But I want to come to what I think is one of the fundamental arguments for theism.
I mean, the only argument should be, look, here's the God. Look at it. It's right there. This is the God. Anything else is just silly.
I take it this house believes in reason. That's why we're all here. And as a scientist, I believe that the universe is rationally intelligible. That is something that has struck some of the geniuses of science as demanding an explanation. Einstein said the only incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. And Wigner talked about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. How is it that a mathematician thinking in her head in here can come up with equations that seem to fit the universe out there? Well, how is it indeed?
Maybe because they're part of the universe and there's some basic understanding of how things work. I could come up with some kind of equation to explain something in the universe. That wouldn't prove a creator of any description. Come on, you shouldn't need a dumb circle to tell you that.
Because the irony of the atheist position here is evident. My atheist friends, and I have many of them, tell me that the driving force of evolution, which eventually produced our human cognitive faculties, reason included, was not primarily concerned with truth at all, but with survival. And we all know, ladies and gentlemen, what has often happened and still happens to truth when individuals or commercial enterprises or nations feel themselves threatened and struggle for survival. A leading philosopher, Alvin Plantinga of Notre Dame, says if atheists are right that we are the product of mindless, unguided natural processes, then they have given us strong reason to doubt the reliability of human cognitive faculties, and therefore inevitably to doubt the validity of any belief that they produce produce, including their atheism.
Oh, come on. You can't mean to tell me that one of the brightest minds at Oxford University thinks that atheism is a belief system, when in fact, it's a lack of belief.
Their biology and their belief in naturalism would therefore appear to be at war with each other in a conflict that has nothing at all to do with God. Yet my atheist friends still insist that it is rational for them to believe that the evolution of human reason was not directed for the purpose of discovering truth. And yet, it is irrational for me to believe that human reason was designed and created by God to enable us to understand and believe the truth.
Well, yeah, but only because you're accepting something that hasn't been demonstrated. Would it be rational to accept that Rodney the Horned Lion was the arch nemesis of Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, Leafy upon her, just because it was written down in an ancient text?
Curious logic. By contrast with that, biblical theism asserts that ultimate reality is personal and intelligent, and the reason science works, and this was the motivating force that drove the great pioneers of science, is that the universe out there and the human mind in here that does the science are ultimately the product of the same intelligent divine mind. Human beings are made, we are told, in God's image.
Well, apart from the foreskins and the wisdom teeth, apparently.
And that means that science can be done.
So now, science can be done because humans are made in a God's image. So the God is good at science? Well now, get that God to let us pesky humans know what experiment will prove it exists.
That makes infinitely more sense to me as a scientist than atheism does.
It doesn't make sense to you that there hasn't been sufficient evidence of a God presented, and that's why it isn't accepted by someone that is an atheist. Yeah, because humans can do the science, there's a God. Well, which one actually makes more sense? And when is what's-his-face in the corner here going to say something?
Now, let me come briefly to ethics. Ethical behavior, like rational behavior, of course, does not itself require religious belief. This is consistent with the fact that humans are created in God's image as rational moral persons.
Oh, yeah, because the God of the Bible is so moral. Because it felt that drowning an entire globe of people was the best way to deal with a situation. Because it feels that if a woman doesn't marry her rapist, she should be stoned to death. Because it has specific instructions on how to own and treat people as slaves. Because it felt that the best way to punish the ruler of a certain country was to kill little babies. Because it decided that when kids called a man bald, the ideal way to punish them was by sending bears to maul them to death. What a moral being.
But just as I suggest that rationality cannot be explained without the existence of God, so I dare to suggest that the existence of morality cannot be explained either. As modern science sprang from Judeo-Christian sources, so did the concept of human equality. Listen to atheist Jürgen Habermas, arguably one of Germany's leading intellectuals. He said that universalistic egalitarianism, from which sprang the ideals of freedom and a collective life in solidarity, the individual morality of conscience, human rights and democracy, is the direct legacy of the Judaic ethic of justice and the Christian ethic of love.
I guess that must mean that folks who never believed in a Judeo-Christian God wouldn't have any morals, ethics, or experience love. I knew there was something about most of Asia that was dodgy. Oh, hang on.
This legacy, substantially unchanged, has been the object of continual critical appropriation and reinterpretation. To this day, there's no alternative to it. Everything else is just idle postmodern talk. And it seems to me he's hitting the core of something important. Because the value of a human being on which such egalitarianism rests is based not on what the human being can do, but what she's made of, or how she's made in God's image.
Whoa. So if you don't believe in the same God, you're not an equal? I'm not sure you should have said that.
I never forget speaking on one of my many visits to Russia to a colleague in the Academy of Sciences. And he said, "You know, John, we thought we could abolish God and retain a value for human beings. We found we couldn't. And we murdered millions of them." And Alexander Solzhenitsyn has said, if I'm asked, why is it that 60 million of my fellow countrymen were sacrificed? He said, the answer is, we have forgotten God.
The actual quote is this. Bad things happen because people have forgotten God, so the bad things didn't happen to those that did believe in a God. I guess those that did believe didn't pray hard enough or something.
Science, of course, marvellous as it is limited. Even a Nobel Prize winner, by analysing a cake, cannot tell why it was made. But Aunt Matilda, who made it, can tell you. She can reveal it to you.
And Aunt Matilda is f***ing demonstrable.
But if she doesn't reveal it to you, you'll never know.
Unless the cake says happy birthday, of course.
And that brings me to my next evidence. It's the same with the universe. We can analyse it magnificently. But ultimately, if it has a maker, and I believe it has, only he can tell us what it's all about.
You believe it has? That should be enough for me, a non-believer, to accept. Oh, this John believes the universe has a creator. Oh, well, I'm suddenly convinced.
And he's done so in the powerful narrative of the Bible, in particular in its analysis of the problem with humanity, not simply in terms of behavioral breakdown between people, but a vertical breakdown of trust between us and the Creator.
How have you jumped from the existence and supposed creation of the universe to the existence of humans and their trust in a God? Why does the existence of humankind matter to the existence of the universe?
The unique solution to that problem is not simply in terms of human ethical development, although that's very important, but in terms of something far deeper altogether. The restoration of the fractured relationship with God through the salvation he has brought through Jesus Christ. A radical relationship that empowers us to live ethically from God.
That same God who, as stated earlier, has very questionable ethics. I don't need a God to make choices to benefit me and my family, much less a God that thinks it's okay for his son, or himself as his son's costume, to send 2,000 pigs into the sea to drown.
And here we reach what for me is the chief evidence, not only for the existence but the nature of God. It is Jesus Christ. He it was who not only taught the golden rule but embodied it, fed the hungry, healed the sick and suffering, and welcomed society's outcasts.
And drowned 2,000 pigs.
Brought honour and respect to the marginalised and ashamed. And he's brought forgiveness and peace to multi-millions around the world. He's able to do this, of course, because though he was a man, he uniquely never was only a man, but God become human.
This just seems to be a whole pile of what John believes. When has it ever been demonstrated that a man called Jesus was the son, but not actually the son, but actually the human embodiment of a floaty sky man? When?
The central evidence for this startling claim is, of course, his historical resurrection from the dead that launched Christianity in the world.
That probably, more than likely, didn't ever happen. Not sure that counts, John.
This is, of course, ladies and gentlemen, a crunch issue. If Jesus rose from the dead, death is not the end and atheism is false.
Yeah, if. But since it's not been proven to have ever happened, can we just skip ahead and say that atheism is the more reasonable position and remain so until someone can actually prove that GZJ actually rose from the dead?
If Jesus did not rise from the dead, Christianity is false.
Exactly. You said it, not me.
And I remember at Cambridge as a student listening to the brilliant Sir Norman Anderson, a legal expert, going through forensically the evidence from his legal perspective as a brilliant lawyer, and he said at the end of it, the empty tomb then of Jesus forms a veritable rock on which all rationalistic theories of the resurrection dash themselves in vain.
Do they though? In that case, the empty zoo cage in Cincinnati Zoo, where Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leafy upon her, once stood, but no longer does, proves the existence of Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leafy upon her. And my wife is a lawyer, so I can get her to verify that, right? Or do I need to say the word brilliant to get it validated correctly?
Just finally now, as I read the Bible, I do not only find intellectual satisfaction, but I find a great deal of that. I sense the voice of God speaking to me.
Sounds like a you problem. Though, if you're hearing voices, John, you may want to go and get checked out by a medical professional.
You say that's intensely personal. But ladies and gentlemen, we've been asked tonight about belief in God. And I want to strongly emphasize that God is not a theory, he's a person. And if the origination of me qua person is a personal God, then the most exciting thing really is there a possibility of getting to know God?
Well, not your God, because apparently that one's personal to you. So maybe you don't actually believe in a God, and you just believe in a you.
And so I don't simply believe there is a God. I've come to know him and trust him. And I have strong reasons for doing so, because of Christ dying and rising again for me.
That's a terrible reason to believe in something. Because you think a being sent itself to kill itself just to appease itself. That's terrible.
And that has generated in me a sense of utterly unmerited forgiveness, acceptance, and peace. That has enabled me to face the ugly side of my own nature, and with God's help to do something about it. But it's enabled me to face something else. The hardest problem I face as a Christian is the problem of evil and pain. My niece getting a tumour at 22 that kills her.
Which your God allowed to happen because the God you believe in created said evil and wasn't powerful enough to stop the evil, or it didn't want to, which just sounds like a shit being.
What do I say to my sister? And this is the hardest problem we face. But it seems to me that atheism here has no answer. Because by definition, atheism believes that human death is the end. So there is no ultimate hope. But you see, ladies and gentlemen, we could stay here till midnight and beyond arguing, as has been done in this university for centuries. What a good God should, might, would, could, if not, possibly might, just could he not have done, and we'll get nowhere.
Stop sticking up for the bad behaviours of an undemonstrated sky wizard.
So it seems to me there's another question we can ask, and it's this. Granted that life presents us with a double picture. We see some beautiful things. We see some ragged edges. We see hurt and pain, and we see joy. How can we come to terms with that? And it seems to me here is no simplistic answer, but a window into an answer, and it's this. If it is actually true that Jesus is, as I believe him to be, the Son of God, then we can ask the question, what is God doing on a cross? And the answer comes back at the very least. God has not remained distant from our human suffering, but has become part of it.
What a cop-out. A God that wants you to worship it but allows you to suffer is a terrible God. And anyone who lives like that needs some help to escape. Abuse is abuse, no matter where it comes from.
And the other side of that is this. Because Jesus rose from the dead, he is going to be the ultimate judge.
But you just believe that G to the Izzle rose from the dead. This whole speech is reliant on a presupposition.
Now here's an irony, because atheism has no ultimate hope of justice by definition. The vast majority of people in the history of the world have died without justice and will die without justice. And if death is the end, then of course they have no hope of ultimate justice.
But ultimate justice is only relevant if all that other stuff can be demonstrated. Who cares about ultimate justice? Why should you care what happens after you die? Live for the now and make life the best it can be.
But the promise in the New Testament, guaranteed by the resurrection of Jesus, is that he is to be the judge in the coming day. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are some of the reasons why I believe that God is real and worthy to be trusted. Thank you.
Hang on, you just explained why you believe, John. You didn't actually give any proof for the God. And Brandon has barely said a word this entire video. Is this how you do reactions?
When Christians talk about God, it is personal. It's not fantasy. It's not the spaghetti monster in the sky. There is a reality of God when you have accepted him on his terms that is completely undeniable. It is as undeniable as my relationship with my wife in the other room.
Oh, no. When he does finally speak, that's what he says? So which is it? Personal or undeniable for everyone? If everyone on Earth had a personal God, wouldn't that then mean there are over 8 billion gods? Sounds a bit stupid when you say it like that.
If you were to tell me that she's not real, I would laugh at you in the same way that if you were to tell me that God is not real. But that type of knowing is not accessible to someone who hasn't met God on his terms.
So we can only see your wife on her terms, otherwise she's unseeable. Sounds like a made-up wife to me.
There's this conceit and this arrogance that actually gets directly in the way of the knowing of God and the relationship of God. And so I just love what Lennox says here, because he starts with sort of unpacking like why is scientism the philosophy of science as the only epistemology? Why is that reductionistic? Then he walks into human rights, into morality, and ultimately down to the extremely personal level, which is where all of these conversations must end. So all this being said, I hope that someone listening to this, if anyone is still listening to this, appreciated that as much as I did, because I think that it's a mistake to break apart these pieces and to only talk about this, to only talk about this. A lot of my videos focus on like the moral case for God, but really it is like this tapestry where all of these threads are connected together in this, this Christian worldview. And it's when the threads are working together and you can see the whole. I think Lennox does a phenomenal job in this.
So individually those threads don't prove a God, but once together they do? That makes no sense. It would only take one thing for a God to exist, and that would be for the God to exist. And once that God does exist, atheism well and truly destroyed. And so all John did was talk about what he believed with zero proof, and all Brandon did was sit there for 14 minutes watching John talk and then said his wife was real, so God must be too. I'm not sure that's how to destroy atheism, but maybe you disagree and think that this was the end of atheism. Let me know in the section below. I'm going to skeptic this as more of a tickle towards atheism than a thorough destruction. A big thank you to this month's top level ticks on Patreon: Godless Granny, Addy Rockart, The Enixes, Jakari, Elizabeth, Whiskey Tech Fred, Rick and Travis, as well as all the $3 base ticks. You can become a supporter on Patreon too at patreon.com/theskeptic. The link is in the description, along with links to all my other socials. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. From me, the Skeptic, stay safe, keep thinking logically, and ask questions. Skepticism is the first step towards truth. See you next Saturday.